Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley. And with me today is my guest, Jodi Rumack. How are you today, Jodi?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you on the show. You are the owner and founder of Jodi Rumack Coaching, and you're going to be talking about that with us. And there's a specific twist to the coaching that you do. It's not necessarily coaching one-on-one with clients. You're working with other coaches in helping them to launch and scale a group coaching environment. But you're going to share more about all of that with us as we get going. And I always love to have my guests start with how this came to be for them. What led you down this path?
Okay. I spent most of my career in corporate fitness. I was a personal trainer. I was a manager. I was a club manager. I opened clubs all across Canada. And then I was a regional manager for the personal training department. So I kind of did the corporate ladder thing. And then at the end of that, I actually was fired. Pivotal moment, not something that we want to go through, but everything happens for a reason. So I was let go from that job. It was a job I really loved to do. And I decided that I was going to start my own. And I was going to basically recreate the job that I had for myself. I actually started that back in 2013. And there to prove to myself mostly that I could do what I was supposed to be doing in my job. And that's what I did. So I ended up starting as a fitness business coach. I was working with brick and mortar clubs and studios at the time. I did that for 5 years. That business was successful, but there was some challenges with the reoccurring revenue and with knowing the consistent income. And so I actually ended up getting a job in 2018. That was not easy either, but it was what I needed to do at the time in life and in business. And the business was doing well. I just didn't have the consistency that I wanted. So I went and did the job. I stayed there for about a year and a half. I actually worked for my online coach in her 7-figure business as the head coach. And then I was there about 18 months and I went back out on my own. When I went back on my own, I knew that I had to create reoccurring revenue, right? I couldn't just count on having a really big month, typically followed by a not so great month. When I started doing that, I decided to do group coaching, which is actually what I had done in my corporate job. And so I did group coaching with reoccurring revenue, and I was able to hit 100K within 16 months of launching business number 2.
Wow, that's exciting. Thank you for sharing that journey with us. And I think that it's important to hear that we can go through those moments that aren't pretty, don't feel good, and we can bounce back from that. And also the twists and turns. And I think that this is typical, but we don't think about it that way. We think like it should go from point A to point B and no detours in between. But that so rarely happens, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about once you began this new rendition of your coaching and working with other coaches to kind of help them really work on this prioritizing and planning productivity. So it gives them some time freedom. So walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me was wanting to have that time freedom. In a corporate life, if people have been through that, you're working all hours. These days, you're not off when you're off. You're always on the clock. You might be on vacation. You're still answering emails, like all of that stuff. And so I really wanted to create time freedom for myself and be able to pass that on to others. And I think like some of the biggest challenges that I see are that people really struggle to prioritize what they actually need to do. And so they spend all this time doing all kinds of different things when really there's maybe 5 or 10% of that's actually going to get them the results that they're looking for.
Mm.
So I really like to try to focus on that one thing and helping them prioritize what they need to be doing and making sure that they're focusing on one thing at a time so that they can actually get it done, start to finish, and really repeat and reiterate and do all of those things rather than trying a million different things and never repeating anything. And you never know what's actually working if you don't keep doing the same thing over for a little while. So I think that's just such a big part of it. And that's how I've been able to create a 6-figure business, but only working about 30 hours a week.
Oh, that's excellent. I'm sure a lot of the listeners would appreciate that kind of work-life balance there. Something that sparked from what you said is you trying all these things and it's like throwing just random darts at stuff and you have no idea what's actually working. And it also is kind of like that shiny object syndrome. And I think that so many of us who are entrepreneurs or even just in our daily lives, we get easily distracted, pick something up, put it down, and we've never finished whatever that task was.
Yeah.
So maybe if you want to share some ideas around that, like staying focused, what do you have some suggestions?
I do. In the online space, it is so easy to get distracted with all the different people, right? And all the strategies and all the things you could try and all of that stuff. There's a few things. One is I would start by choosing 2 or 3 people you really like, follow them, and leave the rest.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's one, because I know for at least for me, and maybe you did this too, when I first started, I listened to everybody. I listened to all the podcasts, watched all the webinars. You know what I mean? Like you take in so much and then you just get confused. So I think one of the things is choosing 2 or 3 people to follow and sticking to it. And I think the next thing is, like I said a little bit already, is choose the strategy that you're going to try, but do it over and over again. We can't just do one thing one time. And if it doesn't work, think it will never work, right? It will work, but we need to make some tweaks. If you're deciding not to do it because you didn't enjoy it, it didn't feel good, there was something off, okay, I understand, make a change. But if it's just because you didn't get enough people or you didn't make as much money as you thought or whatever the situation is, it's take the same thing, refine it, look at it, figure out what did work, figure out what didn't, make some changes and try it again. Because otherwise, how are you ever going to know what actually worked and what didn't if you just keep doing different stuff all the time? Right?
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Yeah. So thank you. So I just think try to stay with one thing. Like I know it's hard for people because they want to do all the things and it's exciting and it's fun. And if you're a long time learner, you always want to learn and try and listen and all the things. But the thing that's going to get you there faster is doing one. And then the second piece to that would be personal connections. It's so easy, again, in the online space to think, I want to make money when I'm sleeping. Everyone wants their phone to ding ding all day long, right? I always say, like, at the beginning, until you get to the revenue that you want to make every month, personal connection first. So everyone else talks about build your email list and do all these fancy challenges and do all these fancy master classes and all this stuff. And you can do that, but you don't have to do that. Let's get into the direct messages. Go to networking events in person, even if your business is online. Or networking online is cool too, but create that personal connection with people, because the number one differentiator between you and someone else who's doing the same type of coaching as you are is you. So the more we can get to know them, it's that personal branding piece. The more they get to know you, the faster they're going to convert.
Good stuff there for sure. And Jodi, I want to talk a little bit more about what you said. Try it more than once. We want like instant results in just about every part of our lives. And I think that this is the case where we can't just try it once and be like, oh, it didn't work, and then move on to the next thing. It's like you've got to keep trying. And that's takes some perseverance, right? Until it gets to a point when you go, okay, this absolutely isn't working. And now I need to try a new strategy. Not one and done that's not going to cut it.
No.
Yeah. So that's excellent. Excellent reminder for sure. Well, okay. So then let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned the individual kind of one-on-one connection.
Yeah.
And establishing that, and then leading from that point into building community and communities of people. So why don't you share with us kind of some thoughts on that?
Yeah. Again, it's like the belief behind it is that proximity wins. That's what I always tell my people. Proximity wins. The closer you can be to them, the faster they're going to become your clients. So personal invitations, it's like when you go online, you think, I'm going to write all these emails and I'm going to build this email list and I'm going to send these out and people are going to buy and I don't even know them. And yes, that's the goal. At the beginning, as you're building a brand, as you're trying to get people to know and trust you, the personal invitation has to happen first. Let's say I do have an email list. Let's say I have 100 people on it. The conversion rate on an email is between 1% and 3%. If I talk to 100 people in direct messages, I can convert 10 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do that. You want to build fast? Let's do that. Direct messages is like a big one. And the other one is hosting virtual events. And usually I teach people to start with virtual dinner parties, which is literally like going to dinner with 10 of your friends at a restaurant, but we're online. And it's a really simple way for people to create the event, get it done, post it. They don't have to create a million slides. They don't have to know how to sell from stage. They don't have to know any of that stuff. You can literally show up, give a little bit of content, a 3 steps to or a 5 steps to type of content piece, 10 minutes, create discussion, create the community feel that you want to have in your group coaching program, right? And then invite them personally to book a call with you. So everything is personal and getting to know them. And then when you get into messaging people and you're talking to them, you actually have some kind of like basis for your relationship, right? And now instead of messaging you and saying, people get these kinds of direct messages all the time, right? Oh, I thought you'd be interested in X, Y, and Z without having ever spoken to you first. Now I get to go into the message and say, hey, I remember when we met at the virtual dinner party that you mentioned X, Y, and Z. I'm hosting a live training next week. I think you should come. Are you interested? Yes. Great. Please send me the link. Right? So it's just a bit of a different vibe in the way that we connect with people rather than assuming things or doing things without even really knowing who they are.
Yeah. Oh, that's 100% accurate right there. I think that and I say we because I'm seeing it for myself too, is the message that just doesn't hit because you have no real connection with this person.
Yeah.
And so it feels false.
Yeah, they've sent the same message to hundreds of people, right?
Yeah.
But if they know, and listen, you can't have that close connection with thousands of people, but you can have it with 100 or 150 is usually around the number of actual connections you can really have. And when you go into your Facebook group or your Instagram or wherever you're communicating with your people, I always like to have, let's say, 20 to 30 people who you really know, right? And eventually they become clients or they move on or something happens. And then you create that again, right? You have more people that you're meeting through your events, through the direct messages, and you always have this pool of people who you are really strongly connected to.
Yeah.
And then you can personally invite them into your programs.
Good stuff.
Salesy and yuffie.
Yes, exactly. And nobody likes that. Nobody wants to be sold, feel like they're being some sleazy sell kind of thing. That doesn't feel good for anybody, really.
Exactly.
Well, so then let's talk about in that building kind of those events and those communities. And is it personal preference in terms of if Facebook is everywhere, you can't get away from Facebook. So does that seem to be the best place to establish these kind of communities? Or are you finding something else works?
That's a really great question. I think a lot of people again, get caught up in this wanting and feeling they have to be on all different social media platforms, right? I have to be on Instagram. I have to be on TikTok. I have to be on Facebook, whatever. For me, honestly, I think Facebook is the winner for the communities because they have the Facebook groups. No other platform quite has. So there are channels and there are ways to talk to people and there are ways for them to see your content and all that stuff. But Facebook is the only place that there really is a system in the platform for you to have groups, right? And I always love to be able to what I call fish from my own pond, right? Again, it helps the authenticity of the direct messages and the virtual events because when people are in the group, they've asked to be there. They've requested to get into the group. Now I know they want to be there. There's an interest, there's a reason. And so it's a lot easier for you to communicate with these people knowing that they're already interested in what you're trying to do and help.
Yeah, good point. I know that we hear a lot about, and you kind of talked about email lists and this kind of thing. And so just kind of changing gears a little bit, the idea that we don't really own anybody's attention in Instagram or in Facebook feeds or any of that kind of thing. And so that's why the email list is so important because they're your connections and you're speaking to them directly. So if something changes in the algorithm, which does all the time, they're not going to miss your messaging. And so what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think email's great, right? Of course, I use it. I'm running Facebook ads and doing all the things. I think that when you get started, it's important not to rely on it, though. By all means, build your email list, create a lead magnet, go into groups, share it, get on podcasts, run ads if you have the financial, ability to do that. Cool. Build your list. But the 1% to 3% conversion rate on an email list is based on people who have professional designers and copywriters to write their emails, to write their sales pages. And so, of course, those numbers can differ. Like maybe you have a lower ticket offer, it closes higher. Like there's stuff like that. But let's just say that the 1% to 3% is the typical. It's 1% to 3% when all of those things are in place. So instead of spending our time trying to become a copywriter or become a designer or pay someone money that we don't have yet from the business, right? Let's spend that time connecting directly with people, build the lead magnet or build the list in the background, but let's spend that time in messages. Let's spend that time hosting events, getting to know people and building those relationships instead. So yes, build your email list, of course, but don't rely on it to get you your sales.
Yeah, good stuff. Thank you for kind of going into detail. And you're right. I think that the 1% to 3% is probably high if you are new and doing this for the first time. It's probably not even going to be 1% because you don't have the copywriter and the designer and all of that set up. So yeah, great points.
Exactly.
So then let's talk now a little bit about something that you have shared, and it's the 5+1 elements of group coaching. And I'm so curious what that means. And so share that with us now.
Okay, so there are two sort of sections here. So one is the 5+1 elements, and the other is the 5 characteristics.
Okay.
Let's start actually with the characteristics. I think it'll be easier. The characteristics are just how the program is delivered and formatted. So the first one is the length of the program. Most people think that when they create a group program, that it should be 8 weeks or 12 weeks or maybe 16, but usually they think it's short, right? And usually they think they have to run in a cohort where it starts on this day and it ends on this day and all the people join at the same time. But the way that I do it is I do it with a longer program, 4 or 6 months usually. And I do it that way because most people need help to not only get to the goal, but to be able to maintain it or even get to the next level when life gets in the way. Okay. And this comes from my fitness days because we used to sell, like when I started in fitness in 2000, we used to sell 10 sessions. And sure, somebody maybe got a few results, they lost a few pounds, they feel better, they know how to do the workout, but it wasn't sustainable. Once those 10 sessions were done, they didn't come to the gym anymore, their eating fell off, like they didn't have lasting habits. And so over time, we started to sell longer term packages where we were actually selling people for a year at a time, 6 months at a time. And so this comes from that, where it's let's get people to their results, but let's also make sure they can maintain them when life happens. Okay. So that's the first part. The second part is the way that they pay. So I do what I call pay for what you get revenue model, which means that people pay every month. They're committed for 4 or 6 months, but they're paying on a monthly basis. And what that does is it creates reoccurring revenue for the coach so that now, instead of having this 5 or 8 or 10K month followed by zero or a $2,000 month, right? We're creating this consistency where I know how much money is coming in 6 months from now. That's the second part. And then rolling enrollment is the third piece of the characteristics where people can join the program anytime. So what happens with a cohort situation is people feel like I have to get 10 people in because if I don't, I can't let anyone else in for X amount of time. And maybe they're worried what it's going to look like if they only have 1 or 2 people in what's supposed to be a group, right? But if they use rolling enrollment where people can join at any time, they don't have to worry about either of those things. Now we can launch this group coaching program right away instead of waiting and putting it off because I don't have enough people and I'm not sure and all of that. And then the fourth piece is course versus library. So again, most people think they have to create a step-by-step course. They do not. Instead, I have what I call a resource library where the resources are there, but it's a bit more flexible in terms of how your clients can use it, if that makes sense. Okay. And then the last piece is personal invitation, direct messages and virtual events. Let's get to know your people and personally invite them in to join your program. Those are the characteristics of how it runs. And then the 5+1 elements is what actually goes inside of the offer. So in every offer, I always have some kind of one-to-one element. We can still make it personal, even though it's a group. Some kind of group element, like the group coaching call, or some kind of a training or a networking event for your clients or something like that. A check-in piece. This is something where maybe you're connecting with them on a Facebook message or in Voxer or something where you can connect with them in between your sessions. The fourth one here is review or audit. This is something they actually hand into you that you can give them feedback so that, again, it's personal inside of a group. And then the last piece is the bonus. So those are the 5 plus the 1 is the bonuses, which typically you want them to overcome objections that people would have to joining the program. That could be like time, money, am I going to get enough support, and putting in some of the elements that will help overcome those things.
Oh my gosh. No, I love that. Jodi, thank you so much for sharing all of that detail with us in kind of how you structure. And it really is very different than what you would typically see. And that rolling enrollment, especially, I think you're right. It's mostly launch and go, and everybody's doing everything at the same time. And I kind of wonder, how does that affect the amount of time that you're spending on working with the groups, because you've got people starting at different points in time?
Yeah, great question. The resource library it still has a sequential kind of order. It's just not as rigid. Okay. So it is in there where people could just go through the program step by step. But also when people get started, because again, one of my things is I like people to think about their group coaching program as one-to-one coaching in a group format. So the way that we do it is when I start with someone, I'll start with a one-to-one call with them. That's one of their one-to-one elements. And I would create for them a 90-day plan that has a step-by-step of what they need to do. So for the first 90 days of the program, they know exactly what they're supposed to do. And the content inside the resource vault is going to give them all the tools they need to actually complete it. That way, they can follow along for themselves And it doesn't matter if they just started or if I have someone who's been with me for 3 months or 3 years or 5 years. Because when they get on the call, they are following their own 90-day plan and they can ask whatever questions they want. And on the calls, I coach everybody one-to-one, again, in the group form. Everyone gets their own questions answered. And this is what I love about group coaching so much is that they learn from each other. Whether they're early or whether they've been with me for a long time, it doesn't matter because the person who's been with me for a long time is going to listen to the early one and say, "Ooh, I haven't thought about that in 3 months. I should probably do that thing," right? And the person who's early is going to listen to people who've been with me for a long time and go, "Oh, I see what I can do now. I see how this goes. I understand the language. Like I can kind of prepare myself for what's to come." And then people can help each other. So this is why I love group coaching with people in different places.
Yeah, I can see that. That's awesome. The idea of, I know this because I've been doing it. I'm in this stage of the process versus
Yeah.
somebody who's brand new. So there's something else that you share about the group coaching, and whether it's somebody who's a new coach, this idea of you have to do one-on-one versus coaching in a group setting. And so you've got a different philosophy on that. And so why don't
Yeah.
you share that with us?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of coaches talk about having to do one-to-one before they do the group. But for me, if your primary goal is to run a coaching business and let's say you're in a full-time job or let's say you're taking care of young kids or you don't have a lot of time, right? So group coaching makes more sense for you. You feel comfortable in a group atmosphere for whatever reason that calls to you a little bit more. By all means, you can start with a group program because again, the idea is that we are coaching one-to-one in a group format. But you still get to have that one-to-one connection. You're still going to do that initial call with them and get to know them, right? They're not just being dropped into it from a parachute and here we go. We're still getting this one-to-one connection with them. If you're using a check-in element like Facebook Messenger, there's lots of questions going back and forth. You might have a Facebook group where that's going back and forth. There's lots of support. So there's no reason why these people can't start with group because they're going to be coaching their people individually and bringing them together so everyone can learn from each other.
Yeah. So that's if you want to launch with the group scenario. What about scaling? So what if you've already been coaching for a while and now you're like thinking, maybe I should look at group
Yeah.
options?
Yeah, a lot of people want to do this too, right? This is what happened to me when I was doing my fitness business coaching. I was coaching one-to-one. I was full. I was busy as heck. I wasn't making as much money as I would have been, right? It was taking all the time. And so when you're trying to scale, there are some ways that you can get your clients who are in one-to-one transitioned into group. And some people want to transition completely into group. And some want to keep maybe 2 or 3 one-to-ones and then the rest in group, right? So it depends what you're actually looking to do. But I think it's a nice rollout to say to your one-to-one clients, hey, I'm opening up this group coaching program, especially if they've been with you for a long time. It's a really great option for them to maybe pay a little bit less because as a group coaching client, they're not going to get quite the exact same one-to-one attention. So they can pay a little bit less, but now they can stay, right? A lot of the time, it's like they could be going from one-to-one as the primary. Maybe that's what they want to do. And then when they're done that initial 4-month or 6 months or however long it is, their next step is to roll into the group so they can still stay with you, still get support, pay less, and still get to grow their business or continue to work on whatever their goals are.
Yeah, I love that. And what you shared about, we only have so many hours in the day, and
Yeah.
you can only help so many people in a one-on-one situation with the time that you have available, right? And so I could see how offering group opens it up to you can help so many more people in that format and not eat up all 24 hours of your day trying to do that, but still
Yeah.
provide a lot of value to the people who you're helping. I think that's just fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, okay, let's talk about maybe some challenges that you experienced and this process kind of helped you overcome. And you shared with us the challenges you had being forced to leave a corporate job and then
Yep.
getting back into a different routine. So, what are some other things maybe that you experienced that you grew through, and kind of how did you do that?
There are so many.
Mhm.
Yeah, obviously being let go from a job that I loved was a really tough one. Even the decision to leave my business and take that job was really hard, right? I was doing well, it was fine. The problem was that there wasn't the consistency piece. And so it was hard to leave something that I knew was working, but I also knew I needed to make changes, but I didn't have time at the time to make those changes. I needed to change it now.
Mm.
And so that was a really tricky decision to make, right? Am I going to walk away from this business I've been working on for 5 years? I've replaced my income from my corporate job. Everything is cool, but this consistency piece is missing, but I need it now. And when I transferred over, because I was moving into still a coaching role, I had to let all of my clients go because that made sense. That was really hard. And it was really hard to have to say to my clients, I can't coach you anymore. That was tough. And I went into this business, and at the time, it wasn't ideal. I would have loved to keep doing my own, but it turned out to be a really great step for me. And I learned a lot, and I got to function in this $1 million business and learn a whole bunch of things behind the scenes and stuff like that. I think when you're going through those places, it's always everything really does happen for a reason. It's the same thing with the corporate job. Thank you for letting me go, right? Thank you. So now I make way more money than I did then, and I'm working half the time, right? Everything really happens for a reason. I think those were probably the two biggest. And then again, we all have changes in our lives. And when I left the job to start out on my own again, that was more of a personal decision I had. Ended a relationship with my boyfriend at the time. And it was one of those moments in life where you go, okay, well, it's now or never, right? If I was going to get out of a job and go back out on my own, this was the time to do it. And so that's what I did. And I just knew that when I did it the next time, I had to make different decisions. I had to run things a little bit differently. I wanted my time. I wanted to make more money. I wanted to be able to help more people, which group coaching, lower price point, it's easier for them. It's better for me all the way around. Right. So I think those are the standout moments. And then, of course, there are moments in an entrepreneur day, life, month, year, whatever, where even when things are good, there's always stuff that comes up, right? And anyone who launches knows that some launches can be amazing and some launches are not, even when you're repeating. Like, just sometimes that's what happens. And hopefully there isn't too much discrepancy. And obviously, if there is, we want to look at that and make changes, small changes to make it work. But I've had those days, right? You come off of an amazing launch and you think the next one's going to be exactly the same, and it isn't. And you're looking at yourself going, what just happened? I did the same thing 2 months ago and everything was great. And I did it now and it didn't work. What did I do or not do? Those things are hard. And it's not always easy to see where the gap was or find out what happened. And sometimes the reason isn't that big of a deal, right? It's something little that changed. I think we have to really be resilient and be able to sometimes just take it for what it is and take a deep breath and go, okay, I'm not going to go and change every single thing about the way I'm launching because this one launch didn't work, because that happens a lot. I think there are the big milestone pieces, but then there are also just the things that happen in the day to day of your entrepreneurial life. And we have to be able to roll with it and sometimes be able to step away. And maybe you need to take a break, or maybe you need to take a few days off to just decompress and think about it and come back fresh. So I don't know, maybe I'll just throw this one other thing in here because I know that it really helped me, is that over the last 3 years since I've been running this business, I decided that over Christmas time, I was going to take off 2 weeks and
Good
I
for you.
wasn't at work.
Yeah.
And honestly, that downtime has given me so much to just be able to take all these day to day ups and downs that we're exhausted from and really have some time to absorb and assess and think and decide how I want to show up for the new year, who I'm going to be, and what I need to do now to be that person. Right. So
Yeah.
we have to, go through the hard stuff, but also have some sort of parameters in there for ourselves to be able to come back from it and to be able to keep going and do the next thing.
Jodi, thank you so much for that. That was awesome. I just have to say, there was some things that just came to mind when you were talking about, you said, okay, I know this is the time. I've got to just do all of this. I've got to get out of here. I've got to start my own thing again. And what came to mind was, we sometimes think we're starting over or
Mm.
starting from scratch. But I love the idea that we're not starting from scratch, we're starting from experience.
Yes.
And all of the things that we've been through and learned along the way, we've got as tools now and we can carry forward. So I love that. Remembering that is awesome. And then you're absolutely right. Like the day to day, we are bombarded with
Right.
so much, and we rarely give ourselves time to reflect. And it's so important, if we don't take those minutes, hours, days, weeks, if we can, to really look back on what has transpired and how do we want to move forward. It's just like spinning wheels. So I love that reminder that we've got to take those times for ourselves to reflect.
For sure.
I have to tell you, Jodi, I would love to keep talking and hear more of what you have to share, because it's amazing. And I think that really these principles apply in so many areas, not just necessarily coaching or group coaching or for coaches. Even if you're talking about product launches, if you
Yeah.
sell a product, you think, I'm going to follow this plan with this product and it's going to work. But that's not the case every time. And so you can't throw out the whole structure just because this particular time it just maybe didn't work as well.
Yeah.
Look at other things. And so I think that these ideas cross over many fields. And so thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Thank you.
Before we close out, I always love to ask my guests, what is it that they've read or are reading now that have been influential or beneficial that they want to share with the listeners? So if you'd like to do that, I would love it.
Yeah, for sure. I'll share 2 books. One, which you won't be surprised I'm going to say, is called The One Thing. The One Thing is a book about focusing on the main thing that's going to get you the most results, be focused, all that stuff. That is a huge one. And the second one is a book called Crucial Conversations. And there's a second one called Crucial Accountability. And these 2 books, I actually got certified in how to have these conversations back in my corporate life. And we used them with our teams and our staff and all that stuff. And they can also really apply in your personal life. And so these 2 books are really about how to go into tough conversations, or what you think might be a tough conversation. A lot of people struggle with what they think is going to be hard, and they don't want to upset anybody, and they don't want to have any confrontation and stuff like that. But these 2 books were game changers in the ability to have those conversations and go in with the right mindset and be able to come out with solutions. So whether it's for business or for personal, it honestly doesn't matter. Those 2 books are number 1.
Oh,
Sure.
awesome. Love it. Thank you so much for sharing those great recommendations. And you're so right. I know even for myself, I don't like confrontation. I don't want to have some of these conversations because you think to yourself, well, how are they going to react and what's going to happen? And then it's this snowball of things and what ifs, and which are probably wrong. And so I love the suggestion of these books, because really communication is it is everything. And when you can communicate and have these conversations without all of that thoughts racing around your head, wow, love it. So thank you for sharing those. I will, of course, include that information in the show notes.
Okay.
And so also, are there any podcasts that you enjoy listening to that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Okay, so one of my favorite people to listen to right now is actually Lewis Howes. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. Yeah. Okay, so I've actually liked him for a long time. He's been on my radar since the beginning. I've listened to him probably for the last 8 or 10 years, whatever it's been. And I just have loved watching him evolve as an entrepreneur and in his business and what he's doing, and always loved him. And I just love him more and more every time I listen to him. And he's just great perspective. He has this broader content now, which is really great to see. He's talking about business, talking about relationships, talking about life, talking about all the things. So he's a really great one to get a little bit of everything.
Nice. Yeah, for sure. I follow him as well and I have for probably the last, 4 years, I would say. And yeah, I absolutely agree. He's written some great books and his podcast is phenomenal. His guests that he features as well share amazing information. So absolutely, I agree. And a great recommendation. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Well, lastly, Jodi, before we finish the episode today, I would love for you to share your information with the listeners. How can they find you and follow along your journey and what you're teaching and sharing? And if they have questions, how could they reach out to you?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so probably the best place to find me is actually on Facebook. So just my name, Jodi Rumack. You can find me there. I do have a free Facebook group called the Leadership Loft for high achieving coaches. So you can, if you go to my personal profile, there will be a link to the group there. That's probably the best way. I'm also hosting a workshop about designing the perfect group coaching offer, which I think you'll be sharing the link for that. So those are probably the best two ways, on Facebook and coming to the workshop.
Excellent. And I will for sure include that information in the show notes so the listeners can easily find it. Jodi, thank you again so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your fresh take on coaching and group coaching. And again, this crosses over, I think, in so many different areas. So I really appreciate your time and your knowledge and sharing that with us. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, we'll talk more soon.
Sounds good.
Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.